Hello, this is Keith King, and I'm joined by my colleague Jay Hagan. And today we're going to talk with you about the system of engagement for transit. Well, let's get right into it. And I want to start off by talking about three key points about the system of engagement. And the first is about apps. In fact, it's about delivering applications to individuals to help them do their job better. I'm going to be talking a lot about apps as we go through this presentation. And when I do, what I'd like you to think about are the types of applications that we have on our smartphone. If you think about it, we download those apps onto our smartphone and then we use them. We don't go to training, we don't read manuals, we just use them because they're intuitive. Well, that expectation is coming into the workplace as well. And we want to give these targeted apps to individuals or personas to help them in their day-to-day work activities. This isn't about rolling out IT for IT's sake or GIS for GIS sake. This is about helping facilitate, streamline business workflows. So that's number one, delivering apps to help people do their job better. Number two, it's about getting to data faster. Whether an individual's in the office or out in the field, what we want to be able to do is to allow them to get to the data they need to do their job on a day-to-day basis in 3 clicks or less. Now, it's not always possible to provide 3 clicks or less, but that's what we strive for. And then number three is about building on what you've already invested in, getting more value out of those IT systems that you have in place today. GIS is a really fantastic technology to help you get more value out of these systems that likely are working. A lot of times what we see though is they're siloed systems. And in the transit space, much of that data, if not almost all of that data, has a location component to it. So we can take advantage of that location component using GIS to start to bring the data from these disparate systems together and make decisions across these silos. And that, in the end, helps you get more value out of the investments that you've made. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that apps are a really important part of the system of engagement. So at this point, what I'm going to do is turn it over to my colleague Jay, and he's going to give you a few examples of what we're talking about here, the types of applications that might be deployed as part of the system of engagement. So Jay, take it away.
Thanks, Keith. Let's go through a few examples of some applications that could be used by a transit agency to solve some common business needs. I'd like to start off here with a kind of a simple dashboard. Here we're just looking at bus stops, boardings, and alightings in Chicago. And my team lead likes to refer to this as the Friday at 4 p.m. application. And that kind of resonates with me. I used to work at a transit agency, so I'm familiar with my boss coming to me at 4 o'clock on Friday and saying, councilperson so-and-so needs to know how many bus stops are in his or her district, or how many boardings did they have last month, or how many bus routes or bus stops happen to be in this jurisdiction. And that sounds like a simple enough request, but oftentimes that information lives in spreadsheets or in a number of different systems, so to pull that together can be kind of time consuming. And that's really the beauty of this application, is that we're able to pull all of that information into one application, knock down those silos, and make it readily available. That's also going to provide some self-service. We can make this application available to anyone in the agency that needs access to it. So you can see there in the upper right, there's some querying tools. In this case, we could look by city, ward, or neighborhood, and we can quickly see the number of bus stops, how many boardings and alightings are happening, and even drill down to the individual stop level. This is a really nice targeted app. It does something very specific here, but it's really helping you get increased return on your investment in IT infrastructure. This could be pulling from a number of different systems, but making it available here in one application. Here's another common use case we see at public transit agencies, and that's based around the need to do community engagement. And you may need to do that engagement for a number of different reasons. It could be for a pretty straightforward or simple schedule change. It could be for a major bus system redesign, could be for a fare increase, or a major capital project even. But the idea is that this platform is flexible. In this case, we're using ArcGIS Hub to create a community engagement platform. And that platform can be leveraged on a mobile device. something simple where somebody could even scan a QR code to get information. Or on the right side here, we see it could be leveraged on a typical PC platform. Another major component of this is not only getting information out, but gathering information from the public. So ArcGIS provides you with a number of crowdsourcing applications, from Survey123 to Crowdsource Manager and other applications, to gather that feedback and help you develop community consensus around your plans. Because these applications leverage the ArcGIS platform and are interconnected, we can use it to solve complex workflows. In this case, we're looking at a transit safety management system hazard workflow. In this workflow, we're giving employees of the transit agency the ability to report a hazard that they encounter. And that can be reported from any number of devices, including their mobile device or from their computer. Reports are then funneled to the safety manager, who can then prioritize action, assign risk mitigation scores, and assign work for further evaluation or mitigation. Field workers are given the appropriate tool to evaluate hazards and take corrective action. All of the information collected throughout the process is easily available. Here we're looking at insights, so an analyst could take a look at different incidents or accidents that are occurring and use that information to make a determination about the root cause. Powerful analysis tools can help you make corrective action. Another common need we hear about is the need to track buses, trains, and other vehicles in real time. This is an example of a dashboard looking at buses in the New York metropolitan area. What's interesting about this is that there's some very powerful analysis going on in the background to cluster those buses by the grids that we see there. Now, you might be wondering why that's happening, but if you look over on the right side there, you can see they have almost 6,200 buses in service. So seeing 6,200 dots on a screen isn't too useful, but by aggregating these to the grid, I can see where most of my buses are. And as I zoom in, this is going to recalibrate and calculate where those buses are until I reach a level when I want to see the individual buses. Here's another example of a real-time dashboard from Hawaii. I'm able to track buses in real time, see their location, but I'm also pulling information from a number of other sources. We can see live traffic cameras from the DOT, traffic conditions, Waze alerts, and even HDOT construction projects. So again, we're increasing the value returned on your IT investments by pulling from a number of different sources here. To get this same view, you might have to open up 5 different tabs on a browser to look at weather, construction projects, your bus AVL, Waze alerts, and traffic cameras. Finally, here's another example of interconnected applications. In this case, we're sending field workers out to assess our bus stops to see if they're ADA compliant. Smart forms make the determination of whether or not the stop is compliant, and that information is then passed into a dashboard in real time. The dashboard quickly shows us how many of our stops are compliant, where are those stops that are not compliant, and you can even give us some cost estimates of what it's going to take to get those into compliance. With that quick overview, I'm going to give it back to you, Keith. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move on and talk about some key components of the system of engagement. Now, I first want to start with the destination. This is the place that people go to get to their maps, apps, and data. This is important because this is the tool, this is the method we use so that people can get to their information in 3 clicks or less. But it's more than just a destination for people to organize their data and their apps. It's also where the administrator can register content, whether that content's coming from internal to the organization or if it's third-party content. And it's also where we manage credentials. This allows us to control who sees what, who has access to certain data sets, who can utilize certain types of applications. So the destination is a key part of the system of engagement. Now, once again, I also want to hit on the applications or the apps themselves. And in this context, I want to compare them to building blocks. I think about a building block for a moment. When it's by itself, it's really simple to understand. But that building block is designed to be connected to other building blocks. And if you have enough of the right types of blocks, you can build a large and complex structure. Well, apps aren't all that different.
individual apps by themselves, they are simple to understand, easy to use. But when you connect these applications together, you can support a complex workflow with a lot of different stakeholders. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Here you see two applications that were stood up a few years ago by Florida DOT following Hurricane Irma. Now, a damage assessment on all the bridges was required as a result of that storm. So on the left-hand side, you see one application that was designed for the folks out in the field, the people going to the bridges and performing the damage assessment. The application on the right-hand side is an operations dashboard. This was built for folks back in the operations center so that they could understand what was happening across the state in terms of damage. They needed to understand the extent of the damage, and they needed information so they can make decisions about the recovery. Now, the folks on or in the field rather, they didn't need an operations dashboard. They needed a mobile app. And the people in the operations center, well, they didn't need a mobile app. They needed to be able to consolidate all this information. So these are two different apps for two different people or personas involved in a larger workflow. They're building blocks and they're connected together. In fact, when the people in the field hit the submit button on their mobile app, that information is immediately available for the folks in the operations center to interact with. Now, this assumes that the folks in the field are connected to a network, like a cell network or a Wi-Fi network. But if they're not, that information will get stored on the phone, and when they are connected, it will get pushed to the dashboard. So here, this is just one example of how we can take these individual apps to help people do their job better, but they're connected together so that we can support a larger and more complex workflow. So let's move on to the development of the SOE plan. And we've talked about the users, and the users need applications, and they go to a place to get to those applications, a destination. But how do we get there? Well, let's focus on the bottom part of this diagram. And we have existing business systems, and we want to build on those existing systems. After all, they have very valuable data in them that we want to take advantage of. Well, the way we get to that data and expose it or democratize it for use in the system of engagement, for use in the apps, is we build web services. Now, a web service is an IT term, but often when I'm in front of an audience that doesn't have a technical background, I'll use the analogy of Google to explain a web service, of a search engine. So let's just imagine for a moment that we go to google.com and we're interested in autonomous vehicles. So we type in autonomous vehicles and Google returns all of this information on our screen. Well, Google didn't download that information. What it did is it provided us a link to the source. So we can click on that link and go to the source to get more information about the subject of autonomous vehicles. Well, that's essentially what a web service is. We build this connection back into your existing business systems, and we expose the data in those systems for use in the apps. The great thing about those web services, though, is we can build them once and use them over and over again. So it's a great way to democratize the data in those existing systems and, again, help you get more value out of those investments that you've already made. Now, I want to put this to action and show you an actual plan on the next slide. But before I go there, I just want to warn you that this slide is busy. It's a bit of an eye chart. There are a lot of boxes on it, but if you bear with me, we can walk through it and I think it will make some sense. So what you're looking at here is a summarized implementation plan for a system of engagement at New York State DOT. Now, as we look at this, let's focus in on this top row here. You can see these names like STIP Viewer and Filter and Safety Crash Analysis Viewer. These are apps. These are applications that we identified at New York State DOT folks said they need these applications to help them. Now, underneath each of these apps, these boxes, they represent work activities that need to be completed in order to make this first app operational. And you can see that we've taken these work activities and divided them up into different areas. So we have portal work and services work and data work and platform work. The idea, again, is we perform all of the technical work represented by these boxes, and when it's done, this first app is ready to go. We can move on to the next. Now let's hone in to a particular area on this chart. So this is the area I want to look at more closely, and there's a service. Now, for this first application, the STIP viewer and filter, we needed to build a service. We needed to expose data from an existing IT system. And you can see the lines on that box pointing upstream. That makes sense because we have to point back to the authoritative system. And also you see lines pointing downstream, which implies that, hey, this service is going to play a role in the future, not just on this app, but it's going to play a role on future applications. Let's just take a look at that. So there's that service with the red arrow, and let's take a look at the third application. Notice in the services tier, there is no work required for this third app. No services work required. The reason? We're going to use a service we already built. Now we can take this concept a step further, and if you look further downstream in this plan, and you look at all that white space for those last four apps, basically what this is telling us is that we're going to be reusing work that we've already done in order to deliver those next four apps. So this technology ecosystem that's required to support the system of engagement is being built incrementally as the applications are also being built and deployed incrementally. And this process reduces a lot of risk. Instead of making these large upfront investments on systems and data, we build it one piece at a time. And we can make adjustments along the way as necessary in order to ensure that the technology work that we are doing is actually aligned with the needs of the users. When it comes to developing the system of engagement, there's three parts to this process, and this follows the Esri method. It's understand, plan, and act. We first need to understand what people need to do their job better, and we also need to understand what technology exists today. That's represented by the business track and technology track that you see here. Once we understand, we can build a plan. And once you have a plan, you can take action. Now I want to focus in on the understand and plan part of this process and talk a little bit more about the business and technical track. In the business track, we engage users. These are folks that are not technical. These are in lines of business, and we uncover their needs and translate those needs into applications. And you can see a whole list of different groups that we've talked with across all types of transportation organizations in the past. And we have found that every one of them have needs, and many times those needs for modern tools revolve around location, and GIS can really help meet those needs. Well, there's also a technical track, and this is where we do a deep dive on your existing systems. We want to understand how data is moving around your organization, what's in place today, what's integrated with what. And as we go through this process, as I said before, we develop a plan, and certainly it has technology recommendations, but it's more than a technology plan. It's a people, process, and technology plan. We provide recommendations around training, organizational structure, even some input on data governance. And most importantly of all, it's your plan. You can take this and do with it what you please when it comes to the implementation. You can use the plan to implement the system of engagement yourself. You can bring in some third parties, or of course you can use Esri to implement the system of engagement. So let's take a look at some case studies here. And I want to look at Colorado DOT and the process that we went through to develop their plan for the system of engagement. So you can see here we engaged a lot of people, about 200 people, had a lot of meetings, and really peeled back the onion on over 30 IT systems. Now, from that, we were able to develop 87 applications, 87 apps from folks across the organization. Now, you might be asking yourself, what do we do with 87 apps? That's a lot. Well, it is, and we have to go through a prioritization process with them. And essentially what we do is we ask two questions about these applications. The first question is, what's the value of the application to the organization? Well, we don't answer that question. We can't answer that question. The customer, in this case, Colorado DOT, had to answer that question. So we presented these 87 apps to a core team, and that core team gave each of the apps a ranking on a 1 to 4 basis. 1 being low value, 4 being high value. The second question we asked was, how hard would it be to build each app? Well, Esri can answer that question, and we do. We look at those applications, and we understand what it's going to take in terms of the development of the application, how hard it's going to be to get to the data. Recall, we did a technical track, so we have all the information we need to give a rating on the level of effort for the app. And we do that rating on a 1 to 4 scale as well. So how valuable is the application, and how hard is it to build? Once we have those ratings for each of those questions, we can start to do some analysis. Now, I'm about to move to another slide here that is pretty busy again, but I think if you look at this as a whole, it'll make some sense. You don't need to read all of the text on this slide, but let me just tell you that these are all 87 applications that we identified at Colorado DOT. And we organized them in a certain way. So as you move out here, if you look at this blue axis, the x-axis, as you move out to the right, these applications out here and the columns to the right are harder to build than the applications back to the left. As we move up the green line here, the applications at the top of this matrix bring more value to the organization as compared to the applications toward the bottom. Now, in any project, you want to build some momentum and get people engaged. And one of the ways that we do that is we take a hard look at the apps in the upper left-hand corner. These are high value, low effort apps. So what that means is that these apps are relatively easy to deploy, and they're going to really move the dial for a lot of different individuals in the organization. So we focus in on this group of apps early in the implementation of the system of engagement. Now, I want to tie this concept back to that earlier chart that we looked at in terms of the New York State DOT summarized implementation plan. And these apps, we went through the same process. These applications here are the lower effort, higher value apps. And I want to make just one more point about the importance of this process and the benefit of this process. If we were to change the order of the applications here at the top, then all of the boxes down below would be reorganized. And remember, these boxes represent technology work activities that need to be completed in order to make the applications operational. Now, that's important because the work activities are tied to the app, and the app is tied to what the user said they need. So that means that we don't do technology work unless there's a purpose, unless it's going to benefit the end user. And this really helps us stay on track throughout the process by keeping the main thing the main thing. And the main thing here is the user and getting them tools that they need to help them in their day-to-day activities. Now, when it comes to timing and developing these plans, depending on the size of the organization, it's going to take about 14 weeks. it's not typically ever going to take any longer than 14 weeks, but this timeline could be compressed significantly for smaller organizations. But we do the interviews, both from a business perspective and a technical perspective. We go through the app ranking process, and then we write up the plan. So with all that said, let me just give you some closing thoughts on the system of engagement. As we have observed over the years, some challenges that GIS and IT folks have, we see a lot of different types of circumstances. And, we see situations where there's this tendency to build custom systems that are hard to maintain over time, that can't be upgraded. We see situations where information is scattered or locked up in these disparate systems. Some of our customers get in this cycle of just constantly rebuilding and redoing systems and throwing away old systems and bringing new ones in. In some cases, business and IT, the lines of business and the IT groups are completely disconnected, and they both go off in their own directions. Where business units just initiate their own projects and a lot of times try to leave IT and GIS out of the discussion. And when new applications are rolled out, oftentimes folks resist it. It's a change, and it's hard to accept that change. Well, we think the system of engagement addresses all of these challenges. We have hundreds of applications in the Esri stack, and there's a good chance you own many of them today if you're using Esri technology. And our approach is to configure first and customize second. Configure commercial off-the-shelf software, COTS apps. That means if they break, we're on the hook for fixing it, not you. In terms of information, we organize it by location. And that's what helps to free up or democratize this data so folks can go to a map and they can see what's available to them at that particular location. We help you get more value, as I've said, out of your existing IT investments. And we've seen time and time again how instead of business units and IT being on different pages, they come together and really move the dial for the organization in terms of transforming it. And also the users, well, the applications that we identify, they're not our ideas. They're the users' ideas. They see their input, their ideas being put into action. They get invested in the process early, and they stay involved throughout the whole process of the app development for the system of engagement. So I'll close with what I started with, the 3 key points about the system of engagement. This is what to remember about the system of engagement. We're delivering apps to help people do their job better. We want individuals to be able to get to the data they need from any device at any time in 3 clicks or less. And we're helping you increase the value of the investments you've already made in technology. So that's the system of engagement. I'd love to talk with you more about this approach and give you some more examples of the work that we've done to date. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me